you are one of the few people who stood by me and supported me and believed in me when I was going through all the bullshit I was going through a year and a half ago. And I want to start this conversation off by saying, I appreciate that. That means a lot. You didn't have to do that, but you did it anyways. And that means a lot to me, more than you might know.
Well, first off, that means a lot that you're acknowledging it. And I think as friends, as brothers, it's not what we do or say publicly. It's how we support each other privately. And I know you would have been there for me in a similar situation. And it's just the least I could do for someone who's a friend and a brother.
Yeah, like I said, that means a lot. I wanted to kick this conversation off. I've seen some things on social media over the past several weeks. Steve, who is obviously... he's within your organization. He's somebody I know very well. He's such an interesting personality. He's such a hard ass, but I think deep down inside, he really cares about people. But there's been some viral stuff going on about what you guys are doing with men and how you're training men and how you're leading them and calling them up. And there's a lot of controversy around that. Would you mind explaining that?
Yeah. So as you know, a couple weeks ago, we had our 19th class of the project, the Modern Day Night Project. And for anyone who doesn't know what the project is, it's a 75-hour straight experience for men who are, and some of these men are former military, some are first responders, some are entrepreneurs, some are people that are executives in companies. And so what they have in common is they're men and they lost their sense of, or have never discovered their sense of meaning, purpose, and team. And as you know, when a man doesn't have a sense of meaning, purpose, and team, he is going to start drifting in life. And that's where the vices and escapes typically come in, whether it's infidelity, pornography, alcohol, drugs, you name it, gambling. And so these men, when they come to us to go through the project, it's not like they're going through a mud run or a Spartan race. Nothing wrong with that. It's not like they're going through a 75-hour challenge. They're there because they are looking for that community, meaning, purpose, and team. And they understand that they are having some kind of self-sabotaging behavior that's showing up as a pattern in their life that is constantly limiting their human experience in their marriage, in their business, in their finances, in their health and fitness, in their mental and emotional fitness. And so anyway, we ran the project. And as you know, if you want things to go viral, you want to take your iPhone and take the most sensational clips of a 75-hour experience. And so in total, during the 75 hours, it starts at Tuesday at 1 p.m., goes till Friday at 5 p.m. In total, we probably put up about 16 minutes of content on our social media stories from a 75-hour experience. And the content we put up is Steve mostly dragging these guys around by their rucksacks, is Steve where he takes the K-bar, and Steve's a Marine, and he takes the K-bar out of his side, and he goes, if any one of you who don't belong at the graduation dinner think you're going to make it somehow to the graduation dinner on Friday. And we all have this project tattoo, us instructors, and actually half the graduates now have this tattoo on their hand or body somewhere because it's so meaningful to us. Steve goes, I will take this effing knife and I'll carve this tattoo off my hand. And so, of course, I know he's going to do that. He does that for every class. When I say, hey, guys, now I'm going to introduce my instructors, it always goes to the Navy SEAL, the Comm Marine, Nick, and then Steve. So I conveniently bring up my iPhone and just start recording and, kind of show the expression of all the candidates going through it. So to us, it's standard practice. We want to immediately show them that now we've got dominance over you, that you are now ours for the next 75 hours. We're going to control your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings. We're going to trigger you. And we want to see how they react or respond. Obviously, when a man responds to a situation, he's thought it through. If they react, it's from a place of emotion and feelings. Typically, when a fist goes through a wall in front of your wife and she's scared or your kids see that, that's a reaction, an emotional reaction. And then we will stop those moments and go, hey, where else is this showing up in your life? So the project, the entire 75 hours is a metaphor for life. But of course, those clips in my stories and on the MDK project stories went viral. First, Fox News picked it up, and then Barstool Sports picked it up, and then some big content creators on YouTube, like I think there's one called the Angry Cop or Angry Officer or whatever his account is. Seems like a really solid guy. Seems like a solid guy. But what's funny is Fox News, Barstool Sports, the Angry Cop. There's another big, like 7 million subscriber account on YouTube. Cool dude with long hair. Funny as heck, man. I love his videos. The first time he made a video on us, he goes, look at these guys. They're running a Navy SEAL Buds program in the back of a Walmart, which is actually not true. It's my compound in my gym that you've been to. But I get it. I get it. But they're literally taking clips that we have intentionally taken out of proportion and put out there. What they don't see is the journaling. They don't see the deep work of, talking about the traumas that these men have gone through. They don't see the conversations, and we'll never record the conversations of these men talking about sitting in their car with the pistol in their lap, ready to blow their brains out. Or one gentleman 2 classes ago said, I found myself at 1 a.m, sitting at a park by my house with the pistol in my hand, wondering, what the fastest way it is to kill myself. These are the guys that come to the project, and I say to you, man, they come from former military, first responders. We've had guys that have been congressmen and senators from Mexico to America, men from every walk of life. And it's not like they're looking for a beatdown. They understand that they are about to go through a rebirth and a complete cleansing, emotional purging, and an opportunity to connect with the brotherhood. But nevertheless, social media does what it does best. And Fox News, Barstool Sports, and a few content creators picked it up and really shit on us, which I don't mind because I know the work we do. I hear from the men after the project. And certainly not every guy graduates. Some get injured and have to medically roll to the next class. And others decide this is not for them. And they could, at free will, ring the bell and quit anytime they want. But we did get a lot of negative press. But I'm okay with that because none of that is going to stop me from the mission that we're on, which is serving men and helping them rise to their higher potential and purpose in life. And, oftentimes we'll hear on social media, why are you paying $18,000 for this 75-hour course? You can go to the Marine Corps and they'll pay you to go through a boot camp type experience. Well, again, all they see is 16, 17 minutes out of 75 hours. They don't see where we're coaching them on their relationships with their kids, with their spouses. They don't see where we're referring them to therapists who can help them overcome sexual trauma that they've experienced or physical trauma that they've experienced or limiting beliefs. They don't see where we're coaching them on their business to help them, 5X and 10X their business over the next few years. And I don't know, I've never been a Marine. I'm a civilian. I've never been in the military. But I don't think they teach entrepreneurship, how to deal with relationships, and any of those things, how to deal with trauma. And so those are the things that we work with, and I'm massively proud of the work we do. But it is very misunderstood.
Roughly a month ago, I get an email from our credit card processor that says, we're deleting your account. You have 30 days to find a new processor. So I'm in the middle of I have 10 meetings that day or something like that. And so I'm like, this is nonsense. This had to have been some sort of AI generated thing, or maybe some low level staffer made a mistake. So I just email back and say, hey, I think there was some sort of mistake. Nothing has changed in terms of how we've processed. Nothing in our business has changed. And they're like, no, this is for real. And so I put in a review, like, hey, let's get a review. It's rejected, Ryan. And if you've ever experienced this on YouTube, you get the rejection letter in less time than it takes to somebody to actually review the video, right? So it was like that type of rejection. And so they're like, well, you violated our terms of service. I was like, okay, tell me where in the terms of service we violated. They wouldn't tell us. They just kept sending us a link to the terms of service. I'm like, got it. Got the link. I got it in the last 2 emails. What line? What page are you on, and what did we violate specifically? And they wouldn't tell us. I was like, hey, I just need to get on the phone with somebody. I think there's got to be some sort of mistake that's happened. Let me just get on the phone with somebody. They refused. They would not get on the phone. They're like, we've done your review. It's been manually reviewed, and the decision stands. And so I'm trying to get something out of these emails back and forth, Ryan. And basically the last email they sent me was, look, we think you need to be with a company that's more aligned with you, that, shares your values and will help you and your company grow and blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay. Now it makes a whole lot more sense. So what very likely happened, if I were to guess, if I were to, put the house on it, bet the house on it, some low-level staffer with, purple hair and a nose ring saw some of the things that we were saying during Pride Month about how, Pride's an abomination and, all these different sinful behaviors. And we say all kinds of crazy stuff on our show. Like, we shouldn't kill babies when they're in the womb. 14-year-old girls shouldn't have their breasts removed because they're, gender confused. We say crazy stuff like that. So I'm sure some staffer.
This is absolutely crazy, things you're saying here.
Yeah. And so I'm sure some staffer saw that, didn't appreciate it, and they put us on a list. And we weren't doing massive numbers on there, but that is where all of our donations go through, Ryan. And so the main reason I say this all the time on the show, the main reason why Undaunted Life's even a thing is because we have donors. We have guys like you and I that are giving $10 a month, $25 a month, $50 a month because they like the content and they want to see it continue. Well, this credit card processor processes every single one of those donations, and just like that, they could turn it off. Now, they thought they were doing me a favor because it's like, oh, we'll give you 30 days, but then they're in charge of all the vaulted information, which is the credit card information, which is the most important stuff. And so if the new company I go to can't take that vaulted information and transfer it directly over, you know what happens? Second hardest thing to do is to get someone to sign up to be a monthly donor. First hardest thing to do is to get them to re-sign up to be a monthly donor, right?
Right, sign them up twice.
Yeah, and so it's like, oh, hey, can you go to this new website and set up a new account so that you can give me money for my benefit only? And so, that's the long and short of the situation we're going through. But the overall thing, guys, is, we always talk about, oh, people are getting canceled on social media and blah, blah. Well, look. If you're a private citizen and someone turns off your Twitter account or something like that, that really sucks. And that is tamping down your free speech. But what they want to do is they want to take out business owners. They want to take out people that employ other people. They want to take out content creators, because if you're putting out a counter narrative to the accepted narrative, whether it's on any subject, whether it's, the C word from 2020 or BLM or any of these types of things, if you go counter to the narrative that is accepted, they will do what they can to crush you. And they can use things like the federal government, like the IRS. They can use the, small business bureaus, even in your city, to try and make your life a living hell. And the thing is, we constantly talk about resilience and being resilient in the face of these challenges. But even as Christians, it's like we should expect these things to come. Not everything is persecution. If someone leaves a negative comment on your YouTube channel because they don't like the fact that you say the word Jesus, that's not persecution. This is, though. This is them trying to shut down a dissenting opinion that doesn't go with the accepted orthodoxy of the LGBTQ plus lobby or just leftism in general.
For most of my life, the way that I understood empathy was actually a form of enablement, is that I wasn't actually being honest with people. I was saying all the right things. I was able to wear the masks. I was able to show up and be exactly who I needed to be because I convinced myself like that was the best way to love people, is to help people. And so fierce empathy didn't come until much later, where I started to understand that my perspective on empathy needed some modification. And I realized that I had been lying to myself. I had been lying to other people. I didn't have any courage. I was terrified of what speaking the hard truth in love might actually look like because of the fear of rejection, because of wondering whether or not people were going to accept me or allow me to be a part of the crew anymore. And so it was this discovery process to where eventually I have a working definition now, Ryan. Fierce empathy is being fiercely committed to what you believe, but simultaneously being willing to create an environment where others feel seen, heard, understood, known, and loved. And so what that looks like is that if you and I are in relationship, and that's the foundation, we have to have relationship. We live in a world where everyone thinks that you can hold each other accountable with no relationship. You can call people out on their shit. You can try.
I mean, that's just unsolicited advice, and nobody ever in the history of mankind has appreciated unsolicited advice.
We don't understand that in the world we live in for some reason as a culture. And so in the context of relationship, if I truly love you, Ryan, you don't want someone who's always telling you what you want to hear, right? None of us need that as men. We need men around us who have the courage to say, bro, I love you, I see you, I hear you, but you need to be aware of this, and I need to speak some hard truth right now that you desperately need to hear because your perspective is skewed or because you're making some poor choices. You're not in alignment with the standards that you've set for yourself, that you've communicated to me. And as your brother, I'm going to speak the hard truth in love. So that's where the fierceness comes, is saying I'm going to be fiercely committed to speak the hard truth in love and to cling to what I believe and enter a dialogue. But I'm also going to make sure that I'm creating this environment where there's safety, which a lot of times we as men, we don't really do that.
It makes a lot of sense. And as you were talking about those things and how you define empathy versus fierce empathy, I can't help but think that you, at some point, maybe even you have called yourself this, one of these recovering nice guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely, my man.
Yeah. I heard some things that you had said in that definition. I thought to myself, oh, this is somebody who you got walked on, you got stepped on, you got pushed around. The interesting thing about the nice guy is there's a misconception, I believe, that this is a passive, cowardly, timid weakling. And maybe there's some element of that, but more than anything, this is a manipulative person who is very, very selfish, but they don't display it in what we would generally consider a selfish, braggadocious, arrogant way. They're a lot more subtle about it, and it paints itself as kindness when in all reality it's just selfishness.
It is 100%. It's a false humility. It is the nice guy syndrome, and there's a great book on that. No More Mr. Nice Guy, I'm sure you're familiar with, is a great one. But we don't realize that we live in a culture and a society, and I love, our missions are very similar, Ryan, in that our goal is to help reclaim so much of what has been lost through passivity and through fake and through manipulation. And I was that guy. I was that guy who I thought I was the nice guy. I thought I grew up in a religious household, so I believed that, I was supposed to be a good Christian boy. And I was a good Christian boy, except I was lying to everyone, including myself.
How did that, so, and I want to talk about both, to others and to yourself. We'll get to both of them. But when you say lying, let's just take to others, for example. How did that actually look? Like, what is it that you were saying? What is it you were doing? What were you lying about? Because I think that's kind of a catchphrase that I hear a lot. I was lying to people, but nobody ever explains, what exactly do you mean, and how did you catch yourself doing it?
Absolutely. So you can't, one of the hard things about this is that when you're consistently lying to other people, most often you don't realize it. Like, it's your subjective truth. And so you're not actually aware or consciously aware that you're lying to people. And in my opinion, you can't actually become aware of that until you have someone who literally like decks you right in the face with the truth, objective truth, or until you realize that you have been lying to yourself all along. And so here's what this looks like, is that a very simple example, I'm sure we've all experienced this, is when we're going out to eat with, your wife or your girlfriend, and she leans over and is like, hey, where do you want to go get food? You're like, well, I don't care, right? And then you can get into this little tussle back and forth. It's like, I don't care. Where do you want food? Well, I don't care. Where do you want food? And then a guy starts listing off. You want to go to Carrabba's. You want to go to Olive Garden. You want to go to Ruby Tuesday. She's like, no. That is something so simple that as a man, we don't even realize that we are literally lying. You may not think that it's that big of a deal. You do care. You do have an opinion. And for me, I got convinced that I was trying to love people well by being accommodating, never sharing my opinion, never sharing my thoughts, because I thought, I was fully convinced, Ryan, that it was my job to elevate everyone else around me and invalidate myself, because that was some form of asceticism, some form of altruistic, religious, good Christian boy, what I'm supposed to do. And what I didn't realize, that because I was so deceived around my relationship with myself, everything I was saying was really just lying. I was just literally telling people what I knew they wanted to hear so I could look better in their eyes, but I didn't realize how much that would destroy my soul. And it led me to the point where I ended up in the bathroom ready to end my life with a Glock in my hand.
I like to communicate things in terms of a frame. And this is probably one of the most powerful tools you can have when it comes to having a difficult conversation. And that is, you tell them what you want to talk about, and you tell them how you want it to end, and then you get your buy-in into it. So let's say, Ryan, you and I are working on a team. I have some kind of a little bit more supervisory role in this, and I need to address something serious with you. I could come to you and say, Ryan, I need to talk about the comments you made at last Thursday's meeting. And at the end of this conversation, I need to know that's not going to happen again. Sound good? you're going to go, sounds good. And then we get to actually talk about it. Now I got your buy-in. Now in a weird way, it's like a verbal contract to where you feel like we don't have to worry about any other issue. We know that this is solely the frame. This is what we're going to talk about. Now you compare that with what I just like to call a very upfront sentence, meaning any difficult conversation you need to have, and I use these all the time. You just tell them, you label the conversation itself. So I might start with, Ryan, this is going to be a difficult conversation. As easy as that. This isn't going to be fun to talk about. This may come as a shock to you. This is going to be hard for us to discuss. Whenever you say those things and kind of give them a little bit of a pause, they kind of gather themselves up and ready themselves rather than this wandering, hey, so you know how we've been dating for 6 months and it's been great, really, it has. And all of a sudden they're just like, they start losing their mind. They start spinning in circles. You're not going fast enough, but you're trying to be kind. You're trying to let them down easy. No, it's a terrible, painful thing for them to go through. Instead, you just need to be very upfront right out of the gate. This isn't going to be fun for us to talk about, or you're not going to like this, or this is going to be hard to discuss. That's going to go way better than trying to hem and haw, as they say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think when you do what you called the sandwich thing, where it's compliment, critique, compliment type framework, it really all you're doing, and people aren't dumb. No. You're just teeing people up, So it's like if you came to me and said, hey, Ryan, look, I wanted to talk with you. I think you're a great podcast. And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm all excited. And you're like, but I don't want to be on your show.
For the hammer. You got it.
It's like, dude, I already knew that was coming. So why didn't you just lead with that and not waste anybody's time?
Exactly. Or, part of that advice is not to start with the small talk. Don't start with the pleasantries of when you sit down and somebody goes, so how are things? You good? Everybody, kids are good. People are healthy. Man, this weather, it's crazy, right?
Like, yeah, what are we doing here?
And then here's what they say. They'll say, oh, this weather's crazy, right? So listen, you know how, just that right there, so listen, it's a little bit more of a tone. And what it's communicating is everything I just asked about, it was just fluff. It doesn't really mean anything. I just didn't want to get right into the conversation, what we needed to discuss. But everybody knows. I mean, everybody has this sixth sense of, that's not why you called me in here. So anytime it's a start with a high positive, people are thinking, what's wrong the entire time? Yeah. When's it coming?
To me, when you say that, and as we talk about this, it just seems like it's just more respectful. Sometimes we'll say, and I've caught myself doing this, where I'll say, well, I care so much about this person, I don't want to hurt them. Mm-hmm. If I'm being honest, though, when I'm doing it that way, the improper way, I would say, is I'm not so much concerned with their feelings as much as I'm concerned about how I feel about their feelings. So it's more about me than it is about them.
Oh, man, that's such a good point. Yes. So anytime you are afraid to be direct with that person, to deliver that bad news, what you're really saying is that you don't believe they have enough emotional resiliency, where they have to rely upon you and your communication skills to gently put them on a cloud and make them feel better somehow after the conversation. When it's much more, when you're direct, it can be much more kind in a way. It's much more respectful to just say what you need to say right out of the gate rather than try to come at it indirectly.
In order to get at these apexes at the U.S. government, whether you go Joint Special Operations Command, working at a 3-letter agency, Special Forces, Navy SEAL, or go Ranger Regiment, any of those, as I like to say, the Adventure Plus package options of life, you're going to get to a certain point where, your experiences, they're going to tell you, I'm a very competent person. And you have to be very, very careful. I mean, you see arrogance in some of these circles, and you just, in order to really grow, you have to be really mindful of yourself. And it's more of it's self-awareness is probably one of the most powerful things that you can develop over, and just in having that growth mindset and being able to go out there and try new things. And I mean, when I went from a Green Beret to become a spy, I was just like, all right, I'm going to just, I think this stuff is cool, dude. I'm just going to jump in with 2 feet and figure it out. And I got a good big old slice of humble pie, you know, because I'm entering into a whole community where they're all tired of the James Bond movies of SF guys and Navy SEALs coming in and be like, you know, kicking in doors and the bravado and everything. And to kind of come full circle, what we were talking about at the beginning here is that I had to become someone else. I totally had to become someone else. I couldn't be the guy who was in the Operational Detachment Alpha. That's a Special Forces ODA in that we say a team room, which is like a locker room. And you got a bunch of hardened type A personalities who, you know, signed up to go kill, capture enemy. And, you know, does that have a place in the intelligence community? It does, but I had to dial a lot of that back. And so I think when we are not true to ourselves, when we're not true to our nature, that it's something called, I like to say, it's emotional dissonance. And it takes, right? It takes a lot of calories. And I started looking at myself as that. I realized that I can't be the barrel-chested freedom fighter that I wanted to set up for, or that I signed up for in this particular setting. So it's when you're looking inside these organizations and, you know, wanting to do the job, I wanted to do the job at the expense of being true to myself.
I came of age at a point where I was given a very specific message from schools and from society and from media about what it means to be a man. And it was the front end of that sort of more progressive, more where the old ideas of masculinity are bad, they're outdated, they're toxic. That it was the very beginning of that. And so I like any kid, man, I was impressionable. And in my early 20s, I believed every word of it. And I was like, oh, I need to be nice. I need to be a lot nicer. If I'm just a good boy and I do what I know I'm supposed to do, then I'll get what I want out of life. And slowly, as I entered my early 20s and was on my own out in the world, I realized that I was nice. I thought I was nice, but I wasn't getting what I wanted out of life. I wasn't getting the results that I wanted out of life. And it wasn't, honestly, man, I think the early days, this was like 2013. When did you really get going?
2015.
Okay, so I would have come across you right around then. But some of those early guys talking about stuff like, you know what? Actually, if you're a man, you're going to have a lot better time just spiritually, mentally, not to mention physically and in your relationships, if you're trying to get stronger. If you're actually challenging yourself to build something. If you're actually trying to improve yourself. And that those self-improvement messages that really nobody in my generation had ever heard until 2013, 2014, when it started popping up online, that's what changed everything for me. And so I was like, the first thing I did was I started lifting weights at 26 years old. I'd never really done it before. And almost immediately, like the very first lift, you get your first pump ever, and you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, I did that. That's because of me, and I feel better because of my actions. And that agency was something that was completely foreign to me. That idea that if I wanted something, I was going to have to actually do it and work for it. And that was kind of my first taste of all this other, them telling me that these old school, what it means to be a man stuff is bad. That's not true. And I want to know what's true. And the more I explored, the more I was like, actually, most men are a lot happier and a lot healthier and a lot more successful in their relationships and more successful in their business if they're leaning into what it means to be a man and they're not shying away from it. And these old conceptions of masculinity, they existed for a reason. Our ancestors were smarter than we give them credit for. And more men are discovering that every day. And to the extent I can play a role in that, I'm very grateful.
Do you believe that there's a concerted effort, whether it's conspiratorial in nature or just a bunch of independent actors working to undermine and erode masculinity, or is it simply a byproduct of the current times that we live in? I mean, let's be honest. our need to really step up as our ancestors did is not as great as it once was. And I've got a friend, Jack Donovan, who says in this day and age, you have to choose to be a man. Before, you didn't have a choice, either be a man or die or get people around you killed. And that's not the case today. So is there a concerted effort, or is it just the situation we found ourselves in because good men have come before and created this type of environment for us?
I think the good men, hard times, bad men. You know, that heuristic is very, very useful. But it's a combination of stuff, dude. It's environmental. I mean, you just look at like the average testosterone levels in men today versus our grandfathers. Of course, they're declining, and a lot of those are environmental factors. And are you saying is someone really going to say like that was intentional? Maybe, but it's also, you follow the money. It's convenient to have to make things out of plastic. The plastic gets into our water supply.
Sure.
Yeah, like so is that part? But the result is men who are less comfortable, maybe even less able to embody a lot of those masculine roles and ideals that were so ubiquitous throughout human history. So that's one cause. I do think that there is an effort in media and politics especially, but really all of our institutions to change what the definition of a man is. And you can get into what their motivation for doing that is, but the end result again is a lot of confusion. Young men coming along being like me, dude, and that was 15 years ago. It's gotten so much worse now, or 12 years ago. It's gotten so much worse now. But guys come along and just have this really wrong conception. Like, it's actually pretty good what men are called to do, and if we perform the role that we most naturally fit into, that has net benefits for society. But guys are confused, and women are confused, and everybody's confused, and they don't know who they are. They don't know what's true. And I think a lot of that comes from media. I think a lot of it comes from the schools. I think a lot of it comes from government policies. And is it intentional? Well, it definitely benefits the people in power. So if you want to think about it like that, is follow the power, follow the money, follow the power. If I was a bad guy and I wanted to control a population and keep my power, well, I certainly would want to erode spaces where men could speak freely amongst themselves. I would want to erode spaces where men would improve themselves, and I would want to confuse men so that they would shy away from getting stronger because they'd be less able to defend themselves. So is that what's happening? I don't know. The people making those decisions are in a club that I'm not in. I'm not there for those decisions, but you can connect the dots.
My son got voted for some cool award, my high school age son. And I was pretty damn sure that I told my girlfriend about it. And it happened a few weeks ago. But then as we're on the plane, I said, "Hey, look at this video. It's him on stage." And she starts to get upset. She had forgotten that I told her. And she started to get upset, like, "You didn't tell me this. I don't feel included in your family. This hurts." She got actually rather emotional with me. And I was pretty damn sure I had told her, but I didn't remember 100%. So I decided not to go down the road immediately in that moment of, no, I'm pretty sure I told you, let's go look it up. I actually said, I was almost as an experiment. I said, screw it. I'm actually just going to be with her emotion, even though I'm pretty damn sure I'm right here. But I knew that if I started to argue the facts in that moment while she was emotional, it wouldn't go anywhere because she can't receive the information that I'm giving her. She's at the emotional plane, and so never the twain shall meet. So if I tried to come in with that information, so I actually just sat with the emotion. I said, actually, I hear you, baby. That wouldn't feel good if I was leaving you out of important things in my son's life, and you've expressed this to me before, so I get it, babe. And I just empathized with her without even talking to the facts of whether she was right or wrong. And she calmed down within about a minute or less. And then about 20 minutes later, I pulled up the text. I was like, "Hey, babe, you might want to see this." And I showed her that I had told her 2 weeks ago. But I knew that if I just tried to argue the facts, no matter how right I was, and I was pretty damn right on that one, I just knew in that moment she wasn't ready for it. And so what's the point? And that's what one of the phrases out of the book is feelings first, facts later. when you try to get the facts reconciled first, it never works because she's in an emotional space. Go get emotional resonance with her, give her some empathy. She'll come down, and then you bring the facts into the equation. And it's not a like either or who's right or who's wrong. It's just a sequencing problem. Deal with the emotions first. Settle her nervous system first, whatever that means. Then get to the facts, and you're going to find yourself a whole lot more successful if you've got a reasonably emotional woman. I always say this, guys. It's not masculine to fight with your woman. So if you think it's like masculine to argue your point and get to be right, all you're going to do is devolve into a big fight, which doesn't show you in your power in this world. And so get really skillful in that space of irrationality. Can you actually operate skillfully in that space? And this is what I try to teach guys to do. If you can operate then in that space pretty skillfully, that space tends to shrink in time duration real fast. Like I said, my woman calmed down in a minute or less, but that could have easily turned into a 7-hour fight, quite frankly. So guys, get skillful in that space where it's not governed by the laws of facts. And what you'll find is that space shrinks in, like I said, in time duration.
I think we need to recognize that when it comes to relationships, women are already going into that from a higher degree of vulnerability than we are. And so showing vulnerability to her, I think, is perfectly appropriate if you're serious about it, right? It should never be a manipulative thing. And both of us had grown up in environments where we had seen that break down. And so we wanted it to be genuine. And but we had talked in depth about marriage without either one of us saying, I love you to the other one. Because we also wanted to know that that's what we wanted and that's what we were serious about. But yeah, so that is how I knew that she was going to be, that's how I thought, like, okay, that was a good test of loyalty, right? Basic training. And then when we were in the military, I never had to worry. She never gave me cause to worry. That's one thing too. We talk a lot about the responsibilities that men have to their wives, and I think that's absolutely true. Wives also have responsibilities to their husband. And if your husband's going to be away a lot, making sure that you're conducting yourself in such a way to where you know that he's it for you is really important. And she always did that. Same thing with my combat tours. I was actually over in Iraq in 2006 as well. I was up in Beji in 2006. So we were over in Iraq at the same time. And same thing. She wrote regularly. She'd always send pictures. Like we had children at the time. She would, make stuff for the kids to wear and make sure that they stayed connected with daddy. When I came home from my first combat tour, there wasn't a lot of, there's always that when you come back home and it's reintegrating into the family. She made that so seamless for me because when I was gone, she never complained about me being gone. And it it has to be hard, right? It has to be hard.
Unbelievably hard. Harder on women than it is for the guys overseas, I think.
I mean, they're dealing with so much uncertainty and so much things that they can't control, and they don't get a rifle to shoot off the things that are plaguing them, right? But she always reinforced to my kids for and I went back in 2008. She always reinforced to my kids like, hey, daddy would love to be here with us, but daddy's protecting us, daddy's serving his country, and we are so proud of him. So when I came home, my kids were thrilled to see me. They didn't feel abandoned. They didn't feel disconnected from daddy, right? It was, they loved daddy and they were so happy he was home. And that wasn't me, that was her. And so time after time, she had just demonstrated that when she was committed to when she was also committed to our marriage. And so she embraced the roles that she had to play within that marriage and just consistently reinforced that she was there through thick and thin. And that doesn't mean that every time it was happy too. Like I remember us being on a phone call. I got back from a combat tour, went straight to a J set. I'm on a satellite phone in Bangladesh. I just got an opportunity to go to a Sephardic, which was kind of a high-speed CQB school. And I'm saying, hey baby, when I get back home from Bangladesh, 2 weeks later, I gotta leave and she was not happy. She's like, this ain't war, babe. Yeah. You could be home. This ain't war, right? And but one of the other things that my wife always did for me that was really incredible is and this is rooted in our faith. Our thing is that I am the head of the household. Now, a lot of men get caught up on being in charge without understanding the responsibility that comes with that, because what that honestly means within a biblical worldview is my life for hers. And there's only been one time. There's only been probably 2 or 3 times in the whole course of our marriage where we could not reach resolution on a course of action. And we prayed about it, we debated about it, we talked about it. Sometimes we had heated discussions about it, the whole deal, right? We're both passionate people. And we finally came to a point where it's like the decision has to be made. And she goes, well, babe, I will follow your lead. And when she said that, she didn't just mean, okay, I will begrudgingly do what you say because you're the head of the household and you have that responsibility. It was, I will now commit myself to this decision to make it work.
So she went all in rather than just complied. It was hey, commitment versus compliance.
Yes. It was, I don't agree that this is the hill we should be charging, but we got to charge it. We got to move. So now I'm going to move and now I'm going to charge it. And again, it's one of those things that have just reinforced over time whenever I'm in difficult situations, like, no, I know she's got my back and she knows I have hers. She has to also know that if I have to make a decision, that I have to make so with her well-being and the well-being of our children and our marriage above my own needs, wants, and desires. And sometimes that can be difficult too, because it's really easy to make your own needs, wants, and desires what's best for the marriage or best for the family. And and she has to trust that I'm not doing that.
You need pipe hitters that can flip the switch to violence in a heartbeat, and they do it from a thinking shooter's point of view, meaning they're pulling guns and they're doing what they need to do, but they're also smart enough and experienced enough not to do something stupid in those moments, right? And, pipe hitters tend to be males, not females, and that's what you need around your president. It's important to note, too, the Secret Service is not an offensive unit. It's 100% defense, right? I mean, everything they do is defensive. And that's just how it is in the PSD world, right? You wait for something to happen and then you respond as quickly and as methodically as possible based on your protocols. And so at the end of the day, they are always at the disadvantage, and it's on them plus technology. And then they have this whole department called glass and steel, right? Their glass and steel folks are the ones for putting up, bulletproof glass on a podium, for example. Steel would be the vehicles, and then they've got a lot of other tools in their arsenal that they can bring to bear. But the candidates don't typically get that. That's usually reserved for the president. So I think there's a lot of, I think they're going to end up, with this investigation, and when you go through and assess everything, there's probably going to be some changes. And the big piece for me was, where were the drones that day? The Secret Service drones, the law enforcement drones, the hired security force drone. Where is the drones? Like, they're not, you and I can buy a drone and check out the area and ensure that there's nothing going on that's, suspicious, or some guy's creeping up to a building and then climbing up the side of it and then crawling across the top of it. All of that, a drone would have detected in a heartbeat. But going back to the female leadership and, increasing Secret Service female employment by 30% so that we've seen it, I think that's, I just feel like you need pipe hitters around the leader of the free world.
I agree. I think too many people tend to believe, and this is a direct result of the feminist movement, that just because a woman can't necessarily do the same job a man can do, that she's inferior. And I don't believe that. As far as human worth goes, women bring so much to the table, so much to the equation. We need women in society and culture, but we don't need them in these roles. That's the reality of it. And I would even suggest, and maybe you disagree with me, we don't need them in combat roles. Supportive roles? Sure. Absolutely. I think there's incredible women who are incredibly nurturing, incredibly talented, incredibly intelligent. Do I need them breaking down doors in some foreign conflict? Of course not.
Yeah.
I think only a degenerate, weak, pacified society would even argue that case.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think women have a place in everything in our lives, obviously. And it's nothing against women. It's bringing the best possible performing, highest quality person for the job, right? And if your job is to drag a 200-pound plus man to safety, it probably is going to take another man of that size and strength to do it, So the standards of what the best is, what is the best for the president, and then hire based on that, not hire because we need to fit a certain percentage of different people and demographics into an agency. It's, hey, it's the president of the United States. Now, what does it take to protect him the best we can, right? And there's variables. Then you make sure all of those variables are matched by the people and the technology you put around him. And I think if you worked it backwards, one, that's not discrimination, right? That's just facts that you're adhering to and requirements that you're adhering to. And the odds are it's going to be a bunch of linebackers that can carry a 200-pound man to the safety of a vehicle or whatever the incident is. It's not rocket science. And it used to be the standard. It used to be okay. But as we've seen the last couple of years, it's become strange that different minorities of our population have the biggest bullhorn, and the majority have to sit here and go, "Oh, I guess we gotta go with this. We just have to roll with this." Like, what happened to majority rules? It just doesn't exist, which is the foundation of democracy. So if the majority doesn't rule, then where's the democracy at?
Every breath I took was a performance. And so I did not have the skills to be still and just accept my wife's love. I didn't have the skills to let my daughter nuzzle up against me while I'm watching a show and let her nervous system co-opt mine and just have a safe place. I was an anxious nuclear reactor, all right? My chest was always hot. And so my son did not have an anchor. This is what masculinity ultimately is, a stillness, right? It is I am confident enough that I don't have to be electric all the time. And I didn't know how to do that. It was a set of skills I had to practice. And so I guess technically that's utilitarian, but I had to go learn how to do that. I had to learn how to listen to my wife and not try to solve her problems. She's smarter than me. She was Dr. Delony long before me. I'll never be as smart as her. She doesn't need me to solve her problems. She needs me to be there and listen so that she can anchor in. I had to learn how to do that. I didn't know how to listen to somebody without being like, "Oh yeah, you know what you need to do?" And with guys, we do that all the time, and we don't listen to each other, so we just roll our eyes and like, "That guy's an idiot." But I didn't know how to do that, so it was both and.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you say is that utilitarianism is the byproduct of, in your case, just being confident and comfortable with who you are. So it's not the means, which I think generally meant, and I've done this too, where it's like, I got to provide, I got to fix the car, I got to pay the mortgage, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And if I don't, then I'm not loved and I'm not appreciated and I'm not respected. So I just have to be competent. Versus, I think what you're saying is that competence is just a byproduct of all the other work, and that will come, but it's not the goal in and of itself.
Yeah, and now that we can all take our work home with us, now that we can all get side hustles and we can work from home, we can have 3 full-time jobs working from home if you want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to bed at midnight. But what it's become is it's become heroin. It's become a numbing device that gives us an excuse to not plug in with our kids, with our families, with our communities. And so we do have to provide. We do have to have that terrifying question that I didn't have a psychology for, which is like, there's a famous showdown my wife and I had in the garage after my second book. Like, she's like, "John, we have enough." And I remember yelling, like, as she walked out of the room, I remember, like, not yelling at her, but yelling, like, "What the hell's enough?" I didn't know what that, I never even thought of that word, right? And so there's this idea that we can work and work and work and tell ourselves, we're just providing. If it's not for me, there's going to be. That's true. That's actually true. And how often have I stayed at work till 7 or 8 o'clock? Because it's just easier here, dude.
Yeah.
It's just easier here. I don't want to throw a Frisbee with a 7-year-old, and I don't want to get onto my son because his pants are on backwards or whatever he's trying to do. I'm just going to do another thing here. And I can tell myself it's because I'm paying the bills.
Well, to be fair about the book story and the infamous blow up or whatever you had with your wife, books are a horrible, horrible strain on relationships. So anybody who's out there, and you could write the best stuff in the world, all the things that you should do in a relationship, and it will destroy your relationship if you let it.
The greatest gift you can give to your marriage is don't write a book.
Totally.
Yes, just don't.
Totally.
Amen, dude. Golly.
One of the things that I've been learning, I haven't learned, but I've been learning, is just being able to say, I don't know, or I don't have an opinion, or I don't care about that, is a superpower.
When you just said, I don't know, the next one you said, I don't have an opinion on that, Ryan, I literally felt my shoulders go up around my ears. I just felt it, right? Yes, that's exactly right. I don't know. And I don't know where we got in our heads that our value is based on having some answer. But that's the word. I don't know, man. But it's false. It's fake. It's not real.
Pornography is kind of like alcohol in moderation. It's not a big deal, but don't do too much of it. And then there was the intimacy angle. Pornography is a great way to spice things up in the bedroom. And I think experientially, it's been disproven. I think enough people have experienced both and found out that porn's not really like alcohol. Porn's more like cocaine. Even a little bit is really, really lethal. And I think on the intimacy side of it, there's actually a lot of research now that has followed couples for longer periods of time and shown, sure, within maybe a couple of weeks, you can say that watching pornography spices things up in the bedroom. But over longer periods of time, those couples all report lower rates of marital satisfaction or relational satisfaction and sexual satisfaction. So I think we just needed a little bit more time on our side for people to realize how devastating it actually is.
Well, you said something interesting, and I think we ought to define these couple of terms as well, because we said spice things up, and then almost interchangeably we said intimacy, and I don't think those two are synonymous. I don't think there's anything wrong with either of them. By the way,
yes,
you can bring spice into the life into your sex life, but that doesn't automatically equate to intimacy.
No, definitely not. Okay, especially in this conversation, because if you think about what pornography conveys, it conveys that intimacy is basically just getting your sexual desires and fantasies met. It's all about you, and it's mostly physical. In fact, I would say pornography portrays that it's purely physical, which we know isn't true. I think real intimacy, even in the bedroom, we all know, anyone who's been married long enough or has been in a sexual relationship long enough knows that real intimacy doesn't actually start in the bedroom. It starts outside. It started 3 days ago when your wife was having a tough day, and instead of trying to give her a solution, you were just there and you listened to her. Like it starts way before that. And I think people miss that, but I would say especially our client base, when we're serving people who are struggling with pornography addiction, this is an area, that's why self-awareness is where we have to start, because there's actually such a reduced capacity for empathy and some of those other things that really drive intimacy that, they're clueless. They're kind of clueless, like, oh, I didn't know I needed this to have good intimacy in the bedroom and in my marriage. I just assumed that, sex is physical. That's what I've been taught.
I think the common knowledge is for nowadays, based on your work and everybody else who's in this field trying to, rally against the pornography industry, is that it rewires the brain and it makes you, as you said earlier, less empathetic, less caring, less understanding. I think we all would agree with that, but I'm actually curious why that's the case. Obviously, you're objectifying a woman, so there's that. And then she becomes, I think Matt Walsh calls it a human masturbatory tool. Which is a perfect description of it.
Yeah.
But why does it make you less? How does that happen? If you're in let's say a 10-year committed relationship, how is it that pornography is going to make you less empathetic or less able to connect with your partner?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm going to try not to geek out too hard on this, but I was a university researcher, so I love digging into the neuroscience of this a little bit.
I'll keep you in check if I need to.
Yeah. Keep me in place here. So there's 4 major things that happen to the brain when you watch pornography. The first is a reduced stress response. So literally your capacity for stress is actually reduced when you're watching pornography. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. You're chasing immediate gratification, instant rewards. Stress requires a lot of resilience and long-term play. We can kind of see that. The second thing actually plays into what you were just describing, which is it reduces your prefrontal cortex activity. So the prefrontal cortex is where you make good decisions, executive decision maker. It also is where you house a lot of your capacity for meaningful connection and relationships. And literally they can show that in the brain, you have less circulation to this part of your brain. And so you don't have the same capacity or function to relate to people human to human. They become a lot more object to object. In fact, there's some surveys or some studies that showed people who even masturbate chronically, when you engage in this kind of compulsive sexual behavior, the same part of your brain that is used when you're using a tool is the part that's active when you're engaging in these activities. So the idea is that the person on the screen or the act of masturbation is like a tool for your brain, but there's no personal connection. There's no kind of human experience.
It's very transactional.
Very much so. Yeah. And really it makes us no different than the animals, right? Like that's kind of how they relate and transact. So those two effects are really devastating. But if someone's been watching pornography for a long time, which, for me, I was addicted for 15 years, I really fell into the next two categories quite a bit. So the third effect is desensitization. And desensitization is exactly what it sounds like. It's that you build up this tolerance, and the things that used to give you that rush and that release no longer cut it. So you either need to watch more intensity or something new. And this is why somebody can start off, for me, I started off like downloading stuff on Kazaa and LimeWire. I don't know if you ever got into any of those services, Ryan.
No.
These were like, you could download, files that somebody would just throw up on the internet. And that's how I started to access pornography. But it was relatively vanilla. But as time went on, I started to watch more hardcore stuff. And thankfully, I would say I got out of it before it spiraled into anything else. But we've worked with our share of clients who have started to watch, they watch gay porn, even though they're not gay, but it's the novelty of it. Or, there's animal porn, there's all kinds of obscurity on there, and it'd be easy to judge and be like, well, who would ever do that? But honestly, everyday people do that because their brains are getting so desensitized that it's causing them to seek these things out just to get the same hit that they had when they first started watching. And then the fourth thing
is interesting, if I can say one thing on that, is
please.
I've actually heard that. I don't know, obviously, to the degree that you do, but I have heard that there are men who would consider themselves homosexuals who will actually, I wouldn't say fault necessarily, but credit pornography use as a factor behind their sexual attraction.
Yeah, 100%. And it's literally exactly this dynamic. It's that they experience desensitization and they start to look for something new, something different. They find gay porn and then they experience arousal from it, because all pornography has an arousing component, and it doesn't necessarily say anything about your orientation. But if you don't know that and you say, well, I found this way more interesting than all that vanilla porn I used to watch, maybe I am gay. Like you start to go down this path and start to kind of draw some conclusions or try to reconcile why this is arousing for you and something else that should be normal and heterosexual isn't.
The thing that I have found in all of this and in life is authentic communication, in being able to find a way to express who you are as a man without shame or guilt or suppression or repression, right? And, there's a lot of things that we as men need to work through in order to get to a place where you can confidently and comfortably share and ask and inquire, and say, hey, here are the things that I desire, right? When does a woman ever ask, what is it that you desire, right? And so really tapping into that as men, saying, what is it that I want? What is it that turns me on? What is it that I might light up from that I haven't experienced before? And so getting to the place where you've moved past some of that, suppression, repression, the trauma that you had growing up as a man, right? And then moving into a place where I am comfortable sharing and expressing who it is that I am because I'm comfortable with myself. I've invested enough in myself and I'm confident enough in myself that rejection isn't going to take me away from who I am because I'm authentic in this. I'm a man who loves XYZ. I have a client of mine, and he's a successful business guy, and there's another part of him, and he's into swinging, and he's into eroticism, and he's into all sorts of other things. And he was having a shift. He was having a crisis internally because he's like, how can I be this stand-up good guy, everyone looks up to in this way? And yet he had this religious thing that was keeping him from, hey, I actually really like this part. I enjoy these sexual experiences, and so it's about being comfortable with the fact, like, you have to own all of yourself. You have to own, the lust, the greed, the sexual deviance, because that's what makes us human. It's okay because we're here and we have to be here for it. And if you can own that stuff and then come from, again, a heart-centered place where you're communicating with someone like, I actually really love this and I would love to try this, and is this okay with you, right? And having those conversations, I think earlier on in a partnership, as scary as that might sound, can be helpful, because if you go 5 years without ever expressing your desires and your needs in a sexual sense, that's going to be maybe even really much harder to then have that conversation. It's like, oh, by the way, I like this and this and this,
Right.
And the partner's gonna be like, whoa, well, you
this
never
coming from?
mentioned this before. Like, it would have been nice, right? It would have been nice if you had said, like, hey, by the way. So I think there's a fine line of, again, and you can make it a fun game, right? You ask ChatGPT, list 50 kinks, or ask Google, like, what are 50 kinks? You put them on a piece of paper and you go through and you say, oh, like, this is a yes, no, maybe, or it's a green, red, yellow, right? Of like, green means go, yellow means maybe, and red means stop. And then having that conversation, earlier on, and also saying, like, hey, sexuality is part of us. It's who we are. And we all have different desires, and not shaming the other partner or making them feel badly for what it is that they might like. Because that's the key. Because again, as you said, whatever kind of reaction you're going to have is going to create the next reaction in that partner. So you just have to have an open mind, but not be afraid to express who you are, and then find a partner that's really into that, right? And that's the key. So you want to find someone who's actually in alignment. So you're not with someone, but you're just like, and then you're going to seek it outside your partnership because you haven't been able to express it to your partner, and that's not good either. You don't want that. So it's all about men leveling up in our communication and ownership of who we are, and saying, hey, it's okay, I'm going to own every aspect of me, and then putting that energy out in the world, and then you're going to attract someone who is going to be open-minded for that. In its simplest terms, obviously, in theory, it's a lot easier to say than in practice.